Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's episode, we visit with Philip Cease from the Rock Dell Creamery. Wally Thomas discusses planning for your financial future, and the University of Minnesota Extension provides a new best practice. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections made possible in part by
Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned renewable energy producer in Claremont, Minnesota for more than 20 years, producing ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
Back in 1944, Sam Bauer had a vision to provide tires and heating oil to families. This second and third generation family-run business is still focused on commercial truck, retread tires, tires for your passenger vehicles, and farm equipment too.
Novel Energy Solutions, committed to working with farmers and landowners to deliver a new crop, electricity. More about income potential and lease agreements designed to be top performers at novelenergy.biz.
I've been milking cows for just about 60 years. Farming is a very, very, very interesting way of life, to put it mildly. The ups and downs are tough, but there's a lot of personal satisfaction in what you do. And well, I'm Phil Cease. I'm a dairy farmer from southeastern Minnesota. On our farm, myself, my wife Deb of 47 years, my grandson Zach, and my two granddaughters, Mackenzie and Kayla. I'm 68 years old. I've done this ever since I was 6 years old. My dad was crippled, and my brother and I had to milk the cows when we were just little guys, and we've done it our whole lifetime. So I don't know where the energy comes from. I just like what I do. I like to work. Well, my day starts, I wake up, I get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, 7 days a week. Try and be in the dairy barn at 5 o'clock in the morning, assess everything, feed the cows, try and have the milkers on by 5:30. Hopefully done milking and everything by 7:30. Feed the baby calves, go out and feed the bigger cattle. Put silage in the bunk and turn the cows out hopefully by 8:30, and then clean the barns, bed the barns, put feed back down for the cows, and go up for breakfast. Hopefully I'm in by 10 o'clock for breakfast.
How many cattle do you milk?
I got 60 milk cows. Every cow has its own unique personality. One will switch a tail, one will stomp, one will be calm, one turns around while you're milking and licks you and loves you, and yeah, they've all got their own personality. When you work with a set of cows, as long as I have, you become very in-depth at how they feel, how they act. Pretty much, did my cows stand in the same stall every day, and did they not eat, and why? So, they're down on milk right now, what's the problem? So then you diagnose that cow. Every animal gets a little different feed. Babies get the starter. The next group up gets what we call an 18% TMR. It's got everything in it. They really don't need hay or anything. And then as they graduate into the next pen, they get into the pellets and just the corn feeding with the hay. Our feeding programs are so much more scientific today than they were 40, 50 years ago. 40 years ago, I was happy with 35 pounds per cow per day milk. Today, I'm not happy if they're not over 60. Dad started selling milk here in the early 70s when the Sturtville Co-op Creamery went broke. Rock Dell Creamery is a co-op that provides a service to patrons that sell products and buy products here from us. We just had our annual meeting about a month ago, and our 129th year of providing service to our patrons. In 1889, they formed actually at that time would have been called the Zumbro Co-op Creamery. In 1919, they built the creamery, the current building we're in now. This safe was delivered to the Rock Dell Creamery in 1903, and I've still got the combination for it and everything. Inside it is old shares that you would buy and give to the people as they became patrons, and they could buy stock. And this is your preferred stock paper here. It gets really interesting to look through some of this. Copies of the original bylaws of the Rock Dell Creamery. At the time they formed these, say back in the 30s and 40s, we had 400 and 500 patrons. And the co-op became one voice for all of the patrons. We've got 9 patrons left. Rock Dell is about 18 miles southwest of Rochester, Minnesota. Well, every little town had a creamery because milk was delivered to the cream was actually delivered to these dairies on wagons and carts and behind horse-drawn things because we did not have the transportation, roads or otherwise, back in the 1800s and early 1900s. Originally, these creameries did not buy milk. They only bought cream. That's why you see all the old separators, because farmers years and years ago, and that's back even before my time, and milk was separated at home with these cream separators. Cream was sold to the dairies to make the butters and the cheeses, and the skim milk was fed to the pigs. Every butter maker has a different recipe. Some will be milder, some will be softer, some will be saltier. And there's a different taste. There's a different taste. Years ago, there was a different taste in the spring when the cows went out on grass. And then in the fall, when they came back into just hays and silages, it changed the taste a little bit that way too. In the latter years, when the butter quit, we marketed our milk. Fredericksburg, Iowa bought our milk at Meinert's Creameries for many years, and it just evolved into where we are today. Right now, the milk is delivered directly to AMPI. Associated Milk Producers Incorporated, they buy milk, produce cheeses and for retail sales. 30 years ago, when we had milk trucks picking up our milk, you would leave a slip on the bulk tank with what you wanted them. The next pickup, they'd bring your butter, your ice cream, patron supplies. Today, we do not have private milk trucks that pick up. We've got contract haulers. So we've got all of the products that the dairy farmers and surrounding farmers need to come in and take care of their business on the farm. I mean, we've got a variety of products for even the general public to come in and buy. We're open from 10 to 3 and 9 to noon on Saturday. Every Saturday morning I open at 9, and by 9:10 I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 farmers come in and sit here and drink coffee and solve the world problems till next week. So it's really unique. And we got a lot of people that don't want us to ever close this place because of that. I love what I do. Simple as that.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices, brought to you by
Hello, I'm Melissa Wilson. I'm the Manure Nutrient Management Specialist with the University of Minnesota Extension. In this best practices segment, we're going to talk about integrating fall manure applications with cover crops. A recent study was conducted on 19 on-farm locations across Minnesota. And I want to talk about some of the things that we learned from this experiment and kind of give you some basic tips so that you can implement this on your farm if you are so interested. One of the first things we learned is that you want to get the cover crops established as soon as possible. On some of the farms, they were able to drill the winter rye right after harvest of either silage corn or soybeans, and that cover crop grew really well. In the farms where the cover crop was delayed even a few weeks, that didn't get quite as big in the fall. And the benefit of a bigger cover crop is that that takes up and holds more nutrients when you're going to apply the manure into it. Another thing we learned, and this is very important, but equipment matters. When you have something that does really aggressive tillage, when you're implementing or injecting your manure into that cover crop, you're going to damage the stand. And inevitably you're going to damage the stand, but with the really aggressive tillage, we saw that it took until the spring for any of that cover crop to really start coming back again. On the other hand, if you use something with more minimal disturbance, we found that that cover crop looked kind of rough for the first 2 weeks, but then it started really bouncing back even in the fall. And in the spring, the cover crops looked really great in most cases. Third thing we learned is that cover crops can in fact hold some of the nutrients back. What we did is at all of the on-farm sites, manure was applied across the entire field. And then there was different strips with cover crops and without cover crops across those fields. So we were able to measure the soil nitrate in the top 2 feet of the soil underneath either the cover crop or without the cover crop. And we found that significant amounts of nitrogen were held into the cover crop and were not in the soil. So that's a good benefit because that can hold your nutrients until the spring. The last thing we learned is that the spring management of your cover crop is going to be really important, especially if you're using something that overwinters like winter rye. In this case, the cover crop is going to need to be killed before you plant your next crop. In all of the studies that we did at these 19 on-farm sites, the cover crop, we tried to kill it about 10 to 14 days before planting the next crop, and then it was tilled under. And we think that helped the cover crop to degrade a little more quickly and release those nutrients. But every farm is different, and if you're using different cover crops and things like that, you're going to have to see what works on your farm. Based on these results, we can conclude that cover crops do in fact make a good best management practice for fall manure application. I'm Melissa Wilson. I'm the Manure Nutrient Management Specialist with the University of Minnesota Extension. This has been a best practice segment. Thanks for watching.
We're at Farm Fest, and with me is Wally Thomas. Wally, welcome to Farm Connections.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah.
You know, I've admired your career. You started teaching high school and then adults, and then later moved into farm business management, and then later after that, some lending.
Right.
And then again, some more lending. So you've got a wonderful experience, and I think you're going to be able to help us understand some of the things happening in agriculture today.
Yeah.
So tell us about that early career and how you've moved through that and all the things that you've enjoyed so much.
Yeah, it's been really enjoyable being involved in ag. I got started teaching high school ag in southeast North Dakota. Taught high school ag there in the Red River Valley and had an opportunity to move on and teach post-secondary farm management and ag business at Wahpeton at North Dakota State College of Science. And through that, I was also lucky to come down to southeast Minnesota to Albert Lea as a farm management instructor. So that was my teaching career, and when I was teaching farm management, I had an individual offer me a banking job, and that was in 1993. So been involved in ag banking for 26 years. So and now I'm hoping I can take all that experience and put that to work for producers to help them benefit their operations through secondary ag real estate financing and consulting.
Well, capital is very important on our farms. Without it, we don't turn the wheels, we don't produce crops or
That's right.
food products. So what's happening right now in the farm economy?
You know, right now the farm economy, I think there's some bold opportunities, but you gotta be bold, and you gotta know where your goals and objectives are naturally. But what's really going on, I think, first off, in real estate, farm real estate, it's come down a little bit in value, but the good farmland that is well tiled is holding its value very well. And part of that value is also because we have good opportunities for financing, for capital, because we've got capital at its historically low levels again, as far as available capital to put some borrowed capital into these balance sheets.
Well, speaking of balance sheets, what do you look for in a balance sheet?
And that's a good question. That balance sheet should be it should be right-sized to a point where not only is there good working capital to provide cash for your operating, but it's got to have a balance with where you're at with real estate too, as far as your real estate financing goes. A lot of guys need to take a look at that real estate structure and make sure that they're not borrowed above their capacity, and that balance sheet is right-sized, including ratios that fit within farm financial standards.
Well, it's amazing the farmers and the producers what they really have to look at. They're accounting, their balance sheet, accrual, so they're taking into consideration inventory, and of course the lenders do as well. So when that balance sheet comes in, of course you're verifying it for accuracy, but when you talked about right-sizing, can you expand on that just a little more?
Right-sizing your balance sheet is making sure that you don't have any debts that are out of position, that you've got your working capital position that is right, so that you don't have to borrow 100% of your operating ability, but then also having the ability to pay that debt back based off of what your gross revenue capacity is for your operation. So right-sizing it means that your finances match up with your capacity of your operation.
And that's very important when people are making offers on buying or renting farmland. Do you have some rule of thumb when they are buying farmland, how much the payment should be?
The payments on real estate, the old rule of thumb was that rule of 90. That is really, really old school. What I encourage the people that I work with is that you don't get yourself in a position where your real estate payments, including taxes, are any more than what you'd be willing to pay for cash rent.
So take your principal, your interest, taxes, insurance, add together, and that's about what?
Yep, cash rent in your area. Because if you have it more than what you pay for cash rent, how can you go to your landlords and say, I want a reasonable negotiated land rent?
Great point.
Yeah.
You just listened to Sonny Perdue, USDA Secretary of Agriculture, speak. Any takeaways from that presentation?
I think we're really fortunate, not only with Sonny Perdue as our Secretary of Ag, but also with Colin Peterson as our chairman of our Ag Committee. I think we have people that care, that are looking out for rural America and for agriculture in general. And I felt really good coming away from some of their responses and what they want to accomplish.
Wally, not everybody understands farmers or agriculture. Why is it important when farmers are only about 2% of the population or less? Why is it important for us to have senators and secretaries of agriculture that understand agriculture and support it?
Well, I mean, you just said it, because in agriculture, there's getting to be fewer and fewer people. But there is a situation where it is a very important part of our GDP, okay? And it's a very important part of our trade. So we do need people that understand it and can represent us so that we still have our fair trade, have our reasonable food policy, but yet at the same time have these people that are 2% of the population still making some money. Otherwise, they're not going to be around.
Thank you. Good comments. And we also heard people talking about the expense of farm programs. Most people don't understand, but over 75% of the farm program or agriculture programs actually funds nutrition or diet or food stamps for people that maybe aren't necessarily rural or agricultural.
That's correct. And again, that's the way our whole populace is. Without that food program, also known as SNAP, we wouldn't have a farm program either. So we gotta right size that.
Work together.
Just like we're right sizing balance sheets and working together.
So if I was a grocer on Main Street somewhere, I probably would appreciate the ag program because those dollars come into my grocery store.
Absolutely, yeah, and they do. No matter which way it is, whether it's SNAP programs or it's what the Secretary of Ag and Colin Peterson were able to do with the MFP payments. To offset some of the negative influence on tariffs and trade.
Well, we have a lot of work to do, that's for sure.
Yeah, we do, and everything evolves, and that's why it's always has been exciting working in agriculture, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, we appreciate the good work you do. You've worked in education and in lending.
Correct.
What advice do you have to a producer that needs to approach his banker?
Number one, never not be in full communication with your banker. Number two, I think you need to control your own finances so that your banker doesn't control it for you. And what that might mean is that you look around, and make sure that your balance sheet is getting the capital and the financing that it deserves. And that might be, and more than not, having more than one lender or one financial institution part of your operation.
Use them as a team?
Correct. Yep.
And possibly farm management instructor through the community
Correct.
colleges.
Yep. Yep. Find the right people to put on your team. And that might be multiple lending sources. It's going to be your attorney. It's going to be your accountant. It's going to be your farm advisor. Yeah. Get all those people working for you so that you will have success going forward.
Great advice. Any thoughts on marketing? We've traveled to Morgan, Minnesota, and the crops look pretty good here. They look very good in southeast Minnesota. There's some stress pockets, but we're luckier than some places.
We are very fortunate here in southeast Minnesota and southern Minnesota in general, except for you get out into the southwest part. But on the marketing side of it, there was some great opportunities, I think, from what I see, where guys did take advantage of some good prices that were available in April, May. I think long term, I hesitate to say we've turned the corner, but I think the stars are lining up where we're gonna have some profitability coming back to production agriculture.
Well, we sure hope so.
Yeah.
We need it, we deserve it, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Wally. Great advice.
Thank you, Dan.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
With the explosion in craft beer and small breweries comes an opportunity for farmers. Many local brewers want local ingredients for their creations, including hops. Minnesota growers began raising hops in earnest several years ago and formed a Minnesota Hops Association in 2013. Hop flowers are harvested from the hop plant and are used as a bittering, flavoring, and stability agent in beer, typically adding fruity or citrus flavors.
The hop growing industry in Minnesota started in about 2013 is when we started seeing some growers, and the industry really wouldn't exist if it weren't for the craft brewing industry. So once they came on, before that there would have been zero demand for any Minnesota grown hops out there.
Brock says there are about 25 commercial growers in Minnesota providing hops for craft brewers. Growing hops is a labor-intensive and expensive proposition. Hop plants are perennial and grow on 16-foot tall strings tied to a rigid frame. Some fruit may be harvested in the plant's second year, but it's typically year 3 before the plant is mature enough to fully produce.
There's a lot of interest in growing from people that they see the dollar value of what it is per acre. If it was easy to do everybody would be doing it. It is a very labor-intensive crop. People need to understand that.
In addition to finding varieties that grow well in Minnesota, hop growers are also working to build market acceptance for the Minnesota-grown plant among craft brewers.
There could be more demand. The one thing that we're trying to do as a growers association right now is just increase market acceptance by the brewers of the Minnesota grown.
Depending upon the variety, hop harvest occurs about mid-August through mid-September, with the fruits of the farmers' labors enjoyed by craft beer fans year-round. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
That's all the time we have today. We want to take a moment to thank you, the viewer, for taking time out of your day to watch us here on Farm Connections. Until next time, I'm Dan Hoffman.